There's a big difference between a pilgrim and a tourist. A tourist stands in front of Botticelli's Birth of Venus, lining up the shots, and then, you know, tongue out sideways and clicks. Perhaps it was meant as a critique of the modern eclipse of Eros, but probably more it's saying, dude, look where I am. The world is just a backdrop for curating and promoting the self. But a pilgrim travels differently. Pilgrims feel something missing inside. Their soul desires some new direction or purpose, clarity. There's a discomfort deep enough to leave home and take a journey. Who knows who you will be at the end of your trip? You have to walk to find out. The pilgrim might also stand in front of the birth of Venus rising up out of the sea, but instead they stand in wonder. They let the goddess look back at them. And that gaze asks, where is your passion? What needs to be reborn in you? Pilgrimage, Latin, peregrinus, meaning one who travels foreign fields. The peregrine falcon gets its name from this word because of its great migrations. Often they will spawn up in Alaska, in the Yukon, and then they'll travel and winter as far south as Argentina. It's a traveler. A pilgrim travels the unfamiliar, and they're changed by the experience, and that journey can be exciting and joyful and terrifying from moment to moment. I think you intuitively get this because many of us are from away. We are pilgrims to this peninsula, drawn here, not simply because we love lobster rolls, but our soul is seeking something to be in this beautiful place. What would happen if you made Lent a pilgrimage? What would that look like for you? Pilgrimage as a spiritual act is as old as religion. Stonehenge. People traveled from all over Britain and walked to go to this ancient monument. Holy sites were not just in beautiful places, but they were in what the Irish called the thin spaces. The place where sort of different elements of the earth come together, that these thin spaces are mountaintops where rock stretches to meet sky. It's at the coastline where water and land come together. It's the island that is surrounded by the sea. And they're often places that are very difficult to get to because that's part of the deal with pilgrimage. You have to climb to get to Jerusalem. You have to sail to Iona. You must walk for 30 days or more to take the full Camino in Spain, journeying across a land that might be pretty dry and hot, and blisters are nearly universal. Medieval culture especially had a strong pilgrimage component. People would walk to Jerusalem. They would go to the sites along the way where different saints were associated with cathedrals and places of healing. People thought, if I could walk in the steps of Jesus, follow the footsteps of Paul, that maybe I would discover a deeper meaning. Perhaps if we could see what the saints see, we could see like them. In the Hebrew tradition that Jesus grew up in, there were 3 yearly pilgrimages: Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And in each one, people would journey to Jerusalem, and they would sing together. In fact, if you read Psalm 120 through Psalm 134, those were the Psalms of Ascent, and people would sing them together as they came up the slopes towards Jerusalem. That it wasn't just an individual quest, but it was a group process as you sang and protected each other along the way. So it was built into their liturgical calendar. It was an embodied spiritual practice. So when Jesus goes out into the wilderness for 40 days, I think he was embarking on a pilgrimage rooted deeply in the Jewish tradition. 1,000 years before him, Hebrew slaves escaped from Egypt and walked out into that same land on the Sinai where Jesus went. And his 40 days reenacts their 40 years of wandering, a journey from captivity to freedom. And we begin our 40 days of Lent with this text every year. This text of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness. And I think it invites us to adopt a pilgrim's mindset, even if we're not going to leave the Boothbay Peninsula. We're invited out of our routines and into a time of reflection and discernment. Jesus' pilgrimage actually begins, I think, with his revelation at baptism. As he emerges from the Jordan River, the heavens open, and he hears the divine blessing, "You are my beloved. You are my beloved, and you I am well pleased." And you might think, after having such a great revelation, he would be empowered and ready to go, and it's time to go preach and gather disciples and build my mega church, and there's got to be some fundraising involved, I'm sure, with all of that. But no, he's going to go off the grid. No Facebook, no DoorDash. Led by the Spirit into the wilderness. But in Mark's gospel, it says he was driven into the wilderness by the Spirit. Some pilgrimages are chosen, planned for, prepared because of our longings. But sometimes a pilgrimage begins when we are driven into it. It might be because of an illness, cancer, grief, facing a great injustice in the world. A collapsing democracy can force an entire people into a pilgrimage that reorients how we live and think. So I would think if you heard a message from God and you're going to do something as important as be the Messiah, you better have your head on straight. Power, celebrity, it brings great temptations. And you don't have to believe in a real devil standing in front of you to know that. Jesus faces 3 great challenges that all leaders, in fact, anyone that wants to accomplish something, they face similar challenges. Turn bread into stone. Take care of your material needs first, or take care of the world's material needs. Go out and feed the 5,000, set up soup kitchens and food pantries and feed everyone. All good things to do. But Jesus says, we don't live just by bread. We live by every word of God that teaches us purpose and hope and empowerment and connection to the divine. We need those things, not just food. If you're the Son of God, prove it. Prove that you're the chosen one. Leap from the temple and God will protect you. Leaders can get caught up in their own glory. Create the big PR moments that everyone will see and be drawn to you. Any of us can get caught up in our own ego, our agenda, our rightness. Then we stop listening, we stop growing, we stop connecting with other people. But I think it's this third temptation. It's the most seductive because it wears the face of effectiveness. All the kingdoms of the world, you're in charge. Just bow once. Make an accommodation. Just look the other way this time. History's littered with leaders who began with a genuine vision and they slowly traded it away just one piece at a time. One compromise that felt so necessary until they couldn't remember what they originally stood for. And the next thing you know, you're in the Epstein files. The wilderness is where Jesus decides the kingdom of God can't be built with the devil's tools. In the wilderness, Jesus discovered being beloved. That was sufficient. He needed nothing that the devil was offering. Now, not all of us are driven into the wilderness to face our demons, and yet we might still feel a restlessness, a longing, something pulling us to go deeper. One of my pilgrimage journeys was the chosen kind. I didn't have any illness or crisis, no spirit driving me anywhere. I just had a sabbatical and a bicycle and Jean. We chose to cycle for 275 miles from Assisi in Umbria, and the idea was we would visit all the various sites that were associated with St. Francis. And you might think, oh, you were cycling, you got off easy. It's not like the Camino where you had to walk so far. But if you've been to Italy, you know, right? Every town that you have to get to at the end of the day is a hilltop fortress, right? So every day ends on a bicycle, pedals churning, legs burning, wheels turning slowly up the hill to get to the top. And the way I would get through, especially the really steep hills, is I'd memorize the prayer of St. Francis, and I would recite it until I got the top. So it'd be, you know, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Let me seek to understand and not to be understood until I reach the top. And at Orvieto, it took me 23 times through the St. Francis prayer to reach the top. I couldn't have made it without it. But I chose Francis for a reason. He took a different path. He chose to bring reform by just being something different. He didn't have a big program or building campaign or radical new kind of theology, just a simplicity that how would he imitate Christ? He received a substantial inheritance and he sold it and gave it to the poor because that's what Christ said. And this is all happening at really the height of Vatican wealth and power. He chooses simplicity. And without saying a word, it challenged the power and wealth of the church, and it began to change things. And then he crossed social boundaries like Jesus did. He tended to the lepers. He befriended Muslims. He encouraged women like Claire to start her own monastery. He was an inspiration not only for a whole new Catholic order, but for many social justice leaders that came after him. Many of the liberation theologians took their inspiration from Francis. But I chose Francis, but I didn't really know what I was looking for. But on the Camino, the travelers say to one another, the Camino gives you what you need, not what you want. Which makes me think, did the Rolling Stones go on the Camino? It's making me rethink a number of their songs, right? Sympathy for the Devil. You know, think about it as you go through the Rolodex of, you know, Rolling Stones songs in your head. So I thought, I need courage. I need boldness. I want some of what Francis has. If I walk in his steps, maybe that's what I'll get. But as I went up and down these very steep hills, I discovered something else. I needed beauty. I needed joy. Something shifted in me as I pedaled through the vineyards, as I stood in ancient cathedrals. I learned many things, like dinner is an artistic experience in Italy. I became obsessed with artwork, like all the various kinds of annunciations, and began to collect pictures of them. And when I was outside of Bavaria, I understood why Francis preached to the birds, why he gave blessings to animals, why he said, sister moon, brother sun. What I discovered is really my spiritual life was impoverished. It was too duty-bound, too accomplishment-oriented, and I needed more room for wonder, and that really came with a connection to creation. I think that sabbatical is probably a big reason why I came here to Maine. I wanted to live in a new place, surrounded by beauty, be more a part of it. And I think part of what I discovered is wonder itself is a form of prayer. It's a way of loving God through loving the world that God made. And on this path, I began to see myself more and more a part of beloved creation. Feeling love in the beauty of the earth. Lent. It's more than giving something up. Meditating on your shortcomings. It's about going somewhere. Taking a journey. Even if you're not leaving Boothbay. These 40 days are an invitation, an opportunity to become a pilgrim. A pilgrim, rather than, we can end up just kind of being tourists in our own lives. To stop curating a life to be observed and losing ourselves in wonder. To let something look back at you and ask the question that you've been avoiding for a while. The journey will show you what you need. You might not have even known what it was ahead of time, and that's all the better. And you may discover, as Jesus did in the wilderness, as Francis discovered in the ruins of San Damiano, as I discovered somewhere between Assisi and Orvieto, you are already beloved. You are beloved. There's nothing in the world that you need to prove that. It just is. Friends, the road is open. Buen camino.